My name is Jannat Patel, and I'm the product engineer of the Frappe Learning app. I joined Frappe in the year 2020, right in the middle of a pandemic. It's been almost 5 years since, and in these 5 years, I have seen the engineering team here go through multiple phases of evolution. How things are today were not how things were back then. Today, I'll be sharing with you guys some of the things that we did in the last few years that got us to where we are today. So, as I said, I joined in September 2020. Back then, there were only 3 teams in our engineering division, Framework, ERP Next, and Frappe Cloud. Majority of the engineers were a part of the ERP Next team. I was also a part of the ERP Next team. So when a new engineer joins, they're put through an onboarding process and a buddy gets assigned to them. The responsibility of the buddy is to make the new engineer familiar with our tech stack, our framework, guide them through their assignment, and also make them familiar with our culture. We make sure that we provide the new engineer with all the right resources, but there is not much hand-holding as such. The buddy assigned to me was Rucha Mahabal, and the assignment given to me was a drill-down version of the accounts module of ERP Next. Then, once I completed my onboarding, I was put on customer support. Here at Frappe, we believe that the best way for any new teammate to understand a product is via customer support. I did support for 4 months, and this helped me a lot because I got to see the app actually in action. I got to see the different kinds of use cases. And because there were these tickets raised from different modules of the app, debugging them made me familiar with the different parts of the code base. So after 4 months, I wanted to try something else too. I expressed the same to the team. And then that same week, Rushabh put up a game plan post. There was a small revamping project that needed to be done. We used to have an organization back then called ERP Next Foundation that we later merged with FOSS United. But at that point, there were still 2 different apps and data was being maintained in 2 different places, and we wanted to merge them into one. That was the project. By the way, this is Game Plan, our internal communication forum powered by the Game Plan app. So when I saw this this post, I contemplated for an hour out of nervousness because I was still new. But then I reached out to Rushabh asking if I can take this up. He said yes, and I started working on this project. But then life had other plans. Some priorities changed at FOSS United's end. They wanted to start with Mon School, a learning platform that would teach programming to college students. They needed a learning system for it, and Rushabh asked if I would be interested in it. I was, and that is how Frappe Learning came into existence. A lot of other product engineers at Frappe have similar interesting stories of how they got started with their products. Saqib Ansari used to work on the accounts module of ERP Next. Now this module has very complex reports, and most of the times customers need reports that are very specific to their use case. And we have a report builder in Framework by default, but Saqib envisioned that having a business intelligence tool would make the lives of these businesses easier. And that is how Frappe Insights came into picture. 6 years ago, we did not have Frappe Cloud. We used to host our customers on our own servers using all traditional methods of deployment and hosting. We used to call that Central. Frappe Cloud started purely as an experiment. What if you could just click a few buttons to update your bench and site? Well, that experiment turned out really well in our favor because as of today, our entire business model is based on Frappe Cloud. Faris Ansari started Frappe Books with the idea of providing a desktop alternative for ERP Next. And the components he used for that app, like buttons, inputs, dialogues, etc., were different from the ones used in our framework back then. A few years later, when he started working on Frappe Cloud, he wanted to use those same components. He copied them from Frappe books to Frappe Cloud. Then a few more years later down the line, when he started working on game plan, he thought that it would really be uncool having to copy these components each time for each new product. This was also a time where a lot of new products were under development at Frappe. It made sense to extract these components in the form of a library, and this gave birth to Frappe UI. As of today, almost all the UI components of all our new products are powered by Frappe UI. The thing is, we keep getting ideas, and these ideas are open for anyone to pick and work on. Now, all of this development was roughly happening around the year 2021-2022. This was a lot of new products were under development then, and this was also a time when ERP Next had reached a certain level of maturity. This gave us a bandwidth to experiment with new products. Now, at that point, at Frappe, there were clearly two different categories of products. On one side were all the mature products like Framework, ERP Next, Frappe HR. And on the other end were all the new products like Frappe Learning, Insights, CRM, Help Desk, etc. All of these new products were in their infancy stage. And even though all of these products were very different from each other, they had similar journeys. All of them had to increase the number of signups. They had to increase the number of their active sites. They wanted to make a name for themselves in the market, and they wanted to find the right product market fit. We decided to group them into a team, and we called that team Labs. Under Labs, all of these products continued with their individual journey, but we started tracking some important metrics of these apps weekly on our all-hands meeting. Those metrics were comparing how much increase did we see in sign-up compared to past week, what has been the increase in number of active sites, what has been the retention for the past 8 or 14 weeks, etc. Discussing these metrics every week gave the engineers an idea of if they were moving in the right direction. And then with time, eventually, Labs sort of became the cool kids club. This was Ritvik Sardana the day he found out that Help Desk needed a product engineer and that he can take it up. So how did these apps come into existence? Our way of working is not at all traditional. When we start a new product, we don't have any official meetings on the various phases of shipping. We don't have any official documentation on user stories, their workflows, etc. We do, however, have multiple informal brainstorming sessions. It happens while we're working, it happens at lunch, it happens during our popular chas breaks after lunch. I have even seen brainstorming happen on our bus rides during our offsites. And then when it comes to execution, it's just the engineer with their ideas and their thoughts. They sit and craft the app all by themselves with complete creative freedom. Over the next few months, the engineer works on a POC, taking feedback and regularly iterating on it. In most of the recent cases, the POCs were very quick. Like for example, in case of Frappe CRM, Slides, and Studio, the POC was just made in 2 months. All of this is possible only because of autonomy. And because of it, we've seen most engineers outperform even their own expectations. When it comes to good work, having a sense of ownership is very important. And that is what we do at Frappe. Every single engineer is either responsible for an app or a module in that app. And because of it, we've seen great potential being unlocked in these engineers, and the result has only been good work. This is also something that we look for when hiring new engineers. We do give an assignment during our interview process, and technical skills are very important. But we do also assess if the candidate would fit here culturally. During the interview, we ask random questions that would make the candidate feel that this interview is going in some random direction, but this is our way of finding out, getting to know the person better and getting to know how that person would be able to work with us better. So what happens when these apps are ready? We don't have an official testing team, but that does not mean our apps don't get tested. We eat our own dog food, which means that any product that has come out of Frappe gets launched internally first, months before their official launch. And then over the next few months, these various teams use the app every single day and keep on providing their feedback and reporting issues. In fact, one of the many reasons we start with any new product is because we want to use them in the first place. But the grass has not always been green. As I said, all of these apps were under development at the same time. Where do you think the engineers for these new products were coming from? They were being poached from ERP Next and Framework team. Nabeen was having a really hard time convincing engineers to stick to the ERP Next team. In fact, at one point, 2x salary was being offered to any engineer who promised to do support for accounts and stock module for a year. But none of these tricks were working. As I said, labs had become the cool kids club and everyone wanted to be cool. So when it came to these new products, we were not having a hard time finding any engineer for it because internally there were a lot of takers. We ended up hiring new engineers for ERP Next and Framework. And then Nabeen later had a serious conversation with Rushabh asking him not to poach any more of his engineers. Because of our untraditional ways, things get chaotic a lot. Most of the times, there is no plan in place. The only plan in place being is that all of us will do excellent work. This is also one of the reasons why we don't provide a roadmap, even though being asked for like traditional product companies do. Burnouts are very common. They happen due to any reason. Most of us have some or the other things going on in our lives. I'm sure you too must be facing such things in your lives. We all try to keep it together till we just can't anymore. So I've never shared this story in front of a crowd before, but years ago, there used to be an engineer in our framework team. Her name was Leela. She had done some amazing contributions in our framework. She contributed to the email module, telephony. She refactored some of the complicated bits of our framework. In fact, she was also one of the few people who experimented with single DB multi-tenancy in our framework. Basically, a very good backend engineer. Leela was married with kids, and in a few months, I was about to get married. And I used to be very nervous, thinking of how I would be able to manage my career after getting married. She was the only married female engineer at Frappe back then, and looking at her work and her confidence gave me the assurance that I needed. And I never had any conversations with her because we never worked together and things were still remote back then. But on the inside, I used to root for her success because her success meant that there is a chance that I would make it too. And then one day, I heard that Leela resigned. Not because she found a better opportunity elsewhere, but because those days, she was having a hard time managing work and home together. She just needed a break. That news felt like a personal loss. And many others at Frappe thought too that Leela's exit was a big loss. We didn't want to lose any more engineers for any such reasons. And even though we have a very good leave policy, we provide 45 leaves annually. Sometimes you may just need a break that spans months. So we decided to come up with a sabbatical policy. Under this policy, any employee can take a break spanning from 2 months to a year. It is unpaid, and according to me, this policy helped us retain a lot of good teammates. Suraj Shetty made the Frappe Builder app after coming back from his sabbatical. Rucha Mahabal made the popular Frappe HR mobile app after she got back from her sabbatical. And they were all exceptional engineers even before their sabbatical, but this just proves that taking a break does not mean that you will be left behind in any way when you come back. There was this other problem that we faced a lot. Some of the apps that we started during those period somehow got jinxed. Apps like Help Desk, Wiki, Drive went through a train of engineers, one after another, but none of them managed to do justice to it. And each time we put a new engineer on that project, things got even more complicated because now then the new engineer had to deal with the tech debt left behind the previous engineer. Because of this, it took us many engineers and a few years to get these products to a decent level of acceptance. So now how do we make sure that none of our other products end up being in this cycle? Giving critical feedback is at the core of our culture. And there are various ways in which feedback is given. Coming back to game plan again, our internal communication forum, every engineer is expected to post about their work frequently on game plan. This helps bring transparency because now everyone knows what you're working on. Plus then they also provide their perspective and feedback on the same. The other is open days. They're mandatory for everyone. They're basically equivalent to our demo days. So everyone is expected to present the work that they've done in the past month. And people get really creative on open days. They make really cool presentations, adding screenshots, videos, even giving live demos. So when it's your turn, you get 10 minutes to present your work to the team, and then you get feedback. For me, open days are really exciting because I not just get feedback on my work, but each time I go home after an open day, I feel so inspired by the work of my colleagues. Both game plan posts and open days are very important at Frappe. They are literally a big deal. Apart from this, we have a quarterly review cycle wherein everyone is supposed to write down their reflections about their work from the past quarter, and then that and their upcoming quarter gets discussed with their respective teams. All of this are just our ways of ensuring that a person gets ample of feedback on their work and minimizing the chances of anyone going astray. Now, the one universal truth at Frappe has always been the belief in open source. ERP Next was made open source in the year 2010, first on Google Code and then on GitHub. And all of the other apps that followed have been open source right from their launch. But we were not always honest when we said that all of our apps were 100% open source. So as I said, back in those days, when we were moving in the direction of making Frappe Cloud our bread and butter, Press and Agent, the two repositories that power Frappe Cloud, were not open source for obvious reasons. But then one day, the hypocrisy of it all hit Aditya hard, and he called it out to the entire team openly and expressed that Press and Agent both should be made open source. Obviously, this was not taken lightly. There was an outburst of concerns from our entire sales team because in their eyes, this was plain suicide. It took a lot of discourse and conversation to convince the team that this would not be the end of Frappe. Both Press and Agent were made open source in the year 2022, 2 years after the inception of Frappe Cloud. We have since been 100% open source. And this has been the way major decisions have been made at Frappe. Anytime something new gets proposed or a flaw gets called out in our existing system, things get debated on and discussed till a majority is reached by voting and a consensus is reached. Everyone gets a vote, and that is our way of ensuring that democracy stays alive in our workplace. Now, in all that I shared today, there is one thing that ensures that this system of transparency, autonomy, and freedom works, and that is trust. Without trust, this entire system would just crash. And it's not like we've not seen any downsides of it. We've seen drawbacks of this system. But in our case, the hits have most certainly outweighed the miss. The sales team trusted Aditya's pitch of making Press open source, and today, almost 2 years after that decision, Frappe Cloud is the biggest revenue generator at Frappe. Our entire team at Frappe trusted the engineers in the labs team when their products were not making any revenue, and as of this year, 7 products have graduated out of labs because now they're generating revenue for us and they're no longer infants. New things have to start by assuming good faith in all parties involved. That is how Frappe did it. That is how we went from having a single product, ERP Next, to a suite of products and a stable business model. That is all from my end today. Thank you so much for giving me your time.